He went out to hunt his quarry, but instead he found himself with the Apache woman he couldn't leave. He left before sunrise, when the sky was still dark and the air felt cold and quiet. The camp behind him was asleep, and only the soft sound of his boots touching the ground broke the silence. He walked with a steady pace, carrying a small pack and the weight of a task that had been given to him the night before. He had been told to track a man who had crossed into this wide, rough land. The instructions were simple, and he had followed many instructions like this before. He believed he knew what to expect. He believed he knew how the journey would go. The land stretched far in every direction. Low hills rose and fell like waves, frozen in time. Dried grass moved gently in the morning wind. The first light of the sun slowly touched the horizon, turning the sky from deep blue to soft gold. Paused for a moment and looked around, taking in the quiet beauty of the place. It was not a land he knew well, but he respected it. He knew that in a place like this, a person had to stay alert. Every sound and every sign mattered. He walked for hours without seeing another person. He kept his eyes on the ground, searching for tracks and clues. He had been trained to notice small details, broken twigs, footprints in the dust. A stone moved out of place. The man he was following had left signs, but they were faint and hard to read. Sometimes the trail seemed clear, and sometimes it disappeared as if it had never been there at all. The wind brushed over the ground and erased marks. The land did not make things easy for anyone. By midday, the sun stood high and strong. The heat began to rise, and the air felt heavy. He stopped near a small patch of shade under a crooked tree. He took a drink of water and sat for a while, letting his body rest. As he sat there, he thought about the journey ahead. He had been sent alone because he worked well alone. He trusted his own judgment and his own pace. Still, he could not ignore the feeling that this place held more than he understood. He stood up and continued walking. The ground changed as he moved farther from the camp. The soil became rocky, and the hills grew steeper. He noticed signs that others had traveled through this land long before him. Old fire pits, worn paths, and small carvings on stones told stories of people who lived here. He did not know their stories, but he felt their presence. It reminded him that he was not the first to walk these trails. As the afternoon stretched on, he followed a set of tracks that led toward a narrow valley. The tracks looked fresh at first, but as he followed them deeper into the valley, they became harder to see. He slowed his pace and studied the ground carefully. Something felt different. The trail seemed to split and twist in ways that did not make sense. It was as if the land itself was testing him, asking whether he truly understood what he was doing. He stopped and listened. The valley was quiet, but not empty. Duration. He could hear the distant call of a bird and the soft rustle of wind through dry grass.
He also felt a strange sense that he was not alone.
It was not fear exactly, but a quiet awareness. He had learned to trust that feeling. He turned slowly, scanning the hills around him. He saw nothing but rocks, bushes, and shadows break. Still, the feeling remained. He moved forward again, more carefully now. He stepped lightly, making as little noise as possible. The ground sloped downward toward a small stream that ran between the rocks. The water moved slowly, shining in the sunlight. He approached the stream and knelt to examine the ground near it. There were footprints there, but they were not the ones he had been following. These prints were lighter, more careful. They came and went near the water, then disappeared into the brush. He frowned slightly, trying to make sense of what he saw. The trail he had followed seemed to vanish here. He looked up and studied the land ahead. For the first time since he had begun his journey, he felt unsure of his direction. He had expected a straight path, a clear chase. Instead, he found himself standing at a place where the signs did not match his expectations. He drank from the stream and sat back on his heels. The water was cool and refreshing. As he rested there, he allowed himself to think about what might come next. He knew he could turn back and try another route, or he could keep moving forward and trust his instincts. He chose to keep moving. He had come this far and he was not ready to stop. The sun began to lower in the sky and the light grew softer. Long shadows stretched across the ground. He followed the edge of the stream for a while, hoping to find clearer signs. Instead, he found more silence and more questions. The land seemed to be guiding him somewhere, though he did not yet know where. As evening approached, the air cooled and the sky turned warm shades of orange and pink. He found a place to rest near a group of rocks that offered some shelter from the wind. He set down his pack and looked out over the valley. The land was quiet again, but it did not feel empty. It felt alive, as if it held many stories waiting to be told. He built a small fire and sat beside it, watching the flames flicker. The light from the fire danced on the rocks and cast soft shadows around him. He thought about the task he had been given and the path that had brought him here. He realized that this journey might not be as simple as he had believed. There were people in this land who understood it better than he did. There were paths he could not see, and signs he did not yet know how to read. As the night grew darker, he lay down and looked up at the sky. Stars filled the darkness, bright and steady. He felt small beneath them, but also calm. He knew that tomorrow he would continue. He would follow the signs as best as he could and see where they led. He did not know that his path was about to cross with someone who would change the direction of his journey. For now, he simply rested, listening to the quiet sounds of the land and preparing for whatever waited ahead. The next morning came slowly, with soft light spreading across the hills. He woke before the sun had fully risen, as he often did. The air felt cool and fresh, and the land was quiet in a peaceful way. For a few moments, he stayed still and listened. He heard the gentle sound of wind moving through dry grass, and the faint call of birds greeting the day. It felt calm, but he knew calm did not always mean simple. He packed his things and stood up, looking out over the valley. The stream from the day before was not far away. He walked toward it, hoping to find new signs in the soft ground near the water. The earth there sometimes kept footprints longer than the rocky hills. As he moved closer, he noticed something different. There were fresh marks in the dirt, but they did not match the tracks he had followed earlier. These marks were careful and light, as if someone had walked with purpose, but without hurry. He crouched down and studied them. The prints were smaller than his own, and they moved in a steady pattern along the edge of the stream. He followed them slowly, taking care not to disturb them. The trail led through a narrow stretch where tall grass grew beside the water. The sun had begun to rise higher now, casting warm light across the land. The golden glow made everything look calm and open, but he stayed alert. After a short while, he heard a faint sound ahead. It was the soft splash of water and the quiet rustle of leaves. He stopped and waited. He did not want to startle anyone, and he did not want to be careless. He stepped forward slowly, making sure his movements were easy to see. As he came around a bend near the stream, he saw her. She stood near the water, filling a small container and placing gathered herbs into a cloth bundle. Her movements were calm and steady. She did not look surprised to see him, though it was clear she had noticed him long before he stepped into view. She lifted her head and looked at him with quiet focus. There was no fear in her expression, only awareness and strength. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of the stream flowed gently between them. He kept his hands visible and relaxed, showing he meant no harm. He greeted her with a simple nod and a calm voice. She answered with the same calm tone, her words clear and steady. There was caution in the air, but also a sense of understanding. She belonged to the Apache community that lived in the surrounding land. He could tell by her clothing, the way she carried herself, and the way she moved through the space as if she knew every stone and plant. She studied him for a moment longer, then asked why he had come so far into this area. He explained that he was following a trail and searching for someone who had passed through. He kept his words simple and honest. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she glanced at the ground and then back at him. She told him that the trail he had been following did not lead where he thought it did. The land had many paths, and not all of them were easy to read. Her voice held no judgment, only quiet certainty. He felt a small sense of surprise. He had trusted his skills, yet here he stood unsure. She offered him water from the stream, and he accepted with a nod of thanks. The water was cool and refreshing. As they stood there, the tension in the air eased slightly. They spoke in short sentences at first, careful with their words.
He learned that she gathered herbs and plants from the land each morning.
She knew which paths were safe and which were not. She had grown up here and understood the land in a way he did not. He realized that she had likely seen him moving through the hills the day before. The thought made him pause. If she had noticed him, others might have noticed him too. The land was not empty, even when it seemed quiet. He felt a new sense of awareness. He asked her if she had seen the person he was tracking. She considered his question and then shook her head slowly. She had seen travelers pass through at times, but none that matched his description. Their conversation remained calm and respectful. There was a quiet balance between them. She did not offer more information than she wished to share, and he did not press her. Instead, they spoke about the land and the weather. Perhaps. She pointed out a line of hills where the wind often changed direction. She mentioned a path that led to a higher ridge where one could see far across the valley. Her words were practical and helpful, but they also felt like a test of trust. He found himself listening closely, not just to her words, but to the way she spoke them. There was confidence in her voice and a deep connection to the place around them. He realized that his journey had brought him into a land where he was not the expert. Here, he was a visitor. The thought did not bother him as much as he expected. Instead, it made him more careful and more open. As the sun climbed higher, the light grew brighter and warmer. The morning began to feel alive with sound and movement. She finished gathering what she needed and tied her bundle securely. Before leaving, she looked at him once more and gave a small nod. It was not a promise or a farewell, just a simple acknowledgement. She turned and walked along a narrow path that blended into the hills. He watched her go, feeling a strange sense of stillness. The meeting had been brief, yet it stayed in his thoughts. He had set out to follow one trail, but now he found himself thinking about another. He knelt near the stream again and looked at the ground. The tracks he had followed earlier seemed less certain now. He wondered if he had been led in circles without realizing it. He stood up and looked in the direction she had gone. For a moment he considered following that path instead. But he reminded himself of his task and turned back toward the valley. Still, the encounter had changed something. He moved more slowly, paying closer attention to the land and to the feeling that he was not alone in it. As the day went on, he continued searching for signs of the person he had been sent to find. The trail appeared now and then, but never stayed clear for long. Each time it faded, he found himself thinking about the woman by the stream and the way she had spoken about the land. Her words echoed in his mind, guiding him to notice details he might have missed before. By late afternoon, the sky softened again, and long shadows stretched across the hills. He realized he had not made as much progress as he had hoped. Still, he did not feel frustrated. Instead, he felt thoughtful. The land had given him something unexpected that morning, a meeting he had not planned, and a sense that his journey might hold more than one purpose. As evening approached, he found a place to rest near a small rise overlooking the valley. He sat there for a while, watching the colors of the sky change. The memory of the woman at the stream remained clear in his mind. He did not know if he would see her again, but he sensed that their paths might cross once more. The land felt different now, less like a place to pass through, and more like a place to understand by. He built a small fire and prepared for the night. As he sat by the flames, he thought about how a single meeting could shift the feeling of an entire journey. He had come here with a clear goal, but now that goal felt less certain. There was a new layer to his path, one he had not expected. He did not yet know what it meant, but he felt it would matter. When darkness settled and the stars appeared, he lay down and looked up at the sky. The quiet of the night wrapped around him. Somewhere beyond the hills, life continued in ways he could not see. He closed his eyes, knowing that tomorrow would bring new steps, new signs, and perhaps another unexpected meeting. The next few days moved at a slow and thoughtful pace. He continued his search across the wide land, but something inside him had shifted since the morning by the stream. He still followed signs and watched the ground carefully, yet he found himself paying attention to different things now. The way the wind moved through the grass, the shape of the hills, and the small paths that curved between rocks all felt more important than before. It was as if the land had started to speak in a quiet language he was only beginning to understand. Bas. He walked along a narrow ridge one morning, the sun rising behind him and lighting the valley below. From that height he could see far across the land. A few thin lines of smoke rose in the distance, and he wondered who had made those fires. He remembered the woman by the stream and thought about how she had known the land so well. Her words about the paths and the wind stayed in his mind. He began to move with more care, choosing his steps with patience instead of speed. But later that day, as he followed a trail that curved between low hills, he saw her again. She was standing near a cluster of tall plants, gathering leaves and placing them into a woven bag. She noticed him almost immediately and did not seem surprised. There was a calm understanding in the way she looked at him, as if she had expected their paths to cross again. He gave a small greeting, and she answered in the same simple way. They stood a short distance apart at first. The air between them felt easier than before, less guarded. He asked if she often came to this place, and she nodded. She explained that the plants growing there were useful for many things. She spoke of how the land provided what people needed if they paid attention and treated it with respect. He listened carefully, realizing that every word she spoke came from experience and deep knowledge. He told her that the trail he had been following kept fading and returning in confusing ways. She knelt down and looked at the ground, studying the marks in the dust. After a moment, she pointed to a set of faint tracks that he had overlooked.
She explained that the person he was searching for had passed through days earlier and had changed direction more than once.
The land here had many hidden paths, and it was easy to follow the wrong one if you were not familiar with them. Her help surprised him. He had not expected her to guide him, yet she did so without hesitation. There was no pressure in her voice, only a quiet willingness to share what she knew. He thanked her sincerely. She gave a small smile and said that the land was not meant to confuse people, but it did require patience. They walked together for a short distance, following the faint path she had pointed out. Their steps were steady and unhurried. As they walked, they spoke more freely than before. He shared stories of distant towns, long roads, and the places he had traveled. She listened with interest, asking simple questions about the world beyond the hills. In return, she spoke about her own life and the responsibilities she carried. She talked about gathering food and plants, caring for family, and learning from elders who had passed down knowledge of the land. Her words painted a picture of a life rooted deeply in place and tradition. He realized that their conversations felt natural, not forced. There was no need to fill the silence with unnecessary words. Sometimes they walked quietly, listening to the sounds around them. Other times they shared small stories that made the journey feel lighter. He began to look forward to these moments, though he did not say so aloud.
One afternoon, they reached a high ridge that overlooked a wide valley.
They stopped there to rest. The view stretched far into the distance, and the sky above seemed endless. She pointed out landmarks he would not have noticed on his own. A distant rock formation shaped like a tower, a line of trees marking a hidden water source, and a path that curved through the hills like a faint ribbon. Each detail helped him see the land in a new way. He asked her how she had learned to read the land so well. She explained that she had grown up walking these paths with family and elders who taught her to observe and listen. She said the land was like a book that told its story slowly. If a person rushed, they missed the meaning. But if they took their time, they could understand what the land was saying. He thought about that for a long moment, realizing how often he had moved quickly without truly seeing what was around him. As the sun began to lower, they made their way down from the ridge. He noticed that his search no longer felt like a race. The urgency he had carried at the start of his journey had softened. He still intended to complete his task, but he no longer felt driven by it alone. There was something else guiding him now, a growing respect for the land and for the person walking beside him. They parted ways near a fork in the path. She had her own direction to follow, and he had his. Before leaving, she reminded him to watch the wind and the shape of the ground. Breath. She said those signs often told more than footprints. He nodded, grateful for her guidance. As she walked away, he felt a quiet sense of connection that surprised him. It was not a bond formed quickly or loudly, but one built from shared steps and honest words. Over the next several days, their paths crossed again and again. Sometimes they met near water, sometimes along a trail, and sometimes by chance on open ground. Each meeting felt natural, as if the land itself brought them together. They shared meals of simple food and talked about the small details of daily life. He showed her how he kept track of directions using the sun and stars. She showed him how to find safe water and how to recognize plants that could help in times of need. He began to see that his understanding of the land was growing, but so was his understanding of himself. The quiet moments of walking and talking gave him time to reflect. He thought about why he had chosen this path and what he hoped to find at the end of it. The person he had been sent to track seemed far away now, both in distance and in importance. The journey itself felt more meaningful than the destination. One evening, as they sat near a small fire, they spoke about trust. He admitted that when he first arrived, he had trusted only his own skills. She said that trust in oneself was important, but so was trust in others and in the land. She spoke of balance, how every step taken affected the ground and the people around them. Her words stayed with him long after the fire burned low. Breaths. He realized that his path was no longer a straight line. It had become something more complex and more thoughtful. Each day brought new lessons and new questions. Wildly end of his journey would look like anymore, but he felt certain that it would not be the same as he had imagined when he first set out. As the days passed, the land began to feel less like a place he was passing through and more like a place he was slowly learning to understand. And with each meeting, each shared step, and each quiet conversation, his connection to the Apache woman grew stronger in a way that felt steady and real. The days moved forward, one after another, but they no longer felt like a simple chase. He still woke early and walked the land with care, yet his thoughts were not as focused on the person he had been sent to find. Instead, they often turned toward the quiet lessons he was learning and the time he spent with the Apache woman whose path kept crossing his. What had once felt like a short mission now felt like a longer journey that was slowly changing him. One morning he stood on a hill and looked across the wide valley below. The sun had just begun to rise, and soft light spread over the land. He remembered how, not long ago, he would have hurried down that hill, eyes fixed on tracks and signs. Now he stood still for a moment, taking in the shape of the land, the direction of the wind, and the quiet sounds around him. He had begun to understand that rushing only made the path harder to see. Later that day he met her again near a group of tall rocks that cast long shadows on the ground. She was gathering small branches for a fire and arranging them carefully. When she saw him, she greeted him with a calm nod. Their meetings had become familiar, yet each one still carried a quiet sense of importance. They walked together for a while, following a path that curved gently through the hills. As they walked, he shared more about his past breath. He spoke about the places he had traveled and the tasks he had completed. He told her how he had learned to move quickly and follow clear instructions. She listened without judgment. When he finished, she spoke about how life in her community was built on patience and shared effort. She said that people depended on one another and on the land itself, round in despair. Every choice mattered because it affected more than just one person.
Her words made him think deeply.
He realized that most of his life had been spent moving from one task to another, rarely stopping long enough to form strong connections. The land he walked now felt different. It did not push him to move faster. Instead, it asked him to slow down and understand what was around him. Over the next several days, he noticed how much he had begun to rely on her knowledge. She showed him hidden water sources and safe paths through rocky areas. She taught him how to read the clouds, to guess the weather, and how to listen for small changes in the wind. He shared what he knew as well, showing her how he kept track of direction and how he planned long journeys. Their exchanges felt balanced and respectful, each learning from the other. At times, they walked in silence. The silence did not feel awkward. It felt peaceful, as if words were not always needed. But he found comfort in those quiet moments. He began to feel that the land and the time he spent with her were helping him see things more clearly. His original mission no longer felt urgent. He still remembered it, but it did not hold the same power over his thoughts. One evening, as the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink, they sat near a small fire. The flames moved gently, and the air felt calm. They spoke about choices and how a person decides which path to follow. He admitted that he felt pulled in two directions.
One path led back to the life he had always known, where tasks were clear and expectations were simple.
The other path led into something uncertain but meaningful, where he could continue learning and growing. She listened carefully and did not rush to give advice. After a while, she said that every person must choose the path that feels true to them. She explained that staying in one place or leaving it behind both require courage. What matters is understanding why a choice is made.
Her words were gentle but thoughtful.
They stayed in his mind long after the fire had burned low. The following days were filled with more walking, more conversations, and more moments of reflection. he found himself thinking less about returning to where he had started. Instead, he thought about what he had discovered along the way. He had learned new skills, but more importantly, he had learned to see the world with a different perspective. He had begun to understand the value of patience, connection, and respect for the land. One afternoon, they reached a high ridge that overlooked a wide stretch of hills and valleys. The view was beautiful and calm. They stood side by side, looking out at the land. He realized that he felt at peace there, in a way he had not felt before. The pressure he had carried at the start of his journey had faded. In its place was a quiet sense of belonging that surprised him. He thought about the person he had been sent to track and how far that trail now seemed from his current path. He understood that completing the mission would mean leaving this place and the connection he had formed behind. He also understood that staying would mean choosing a different future, one that was not planned, but felt real. They spoke about what might come next. She did not ask him to stay, and she did not ask him to leave. She simply shared that the land welcomed those who respected it and learned from it. Her words carried no pressure, only honesty. He appreciated that. It allowed him to think clearly about his own choice. That night, he sat alone for a while, looking up at the sky filled with stars. The quiet around him felt steady and comforting. He thought about everything that had happened since he first set out on his journey. He had expected a straightforward path, but instead he had found something deeper. He had found a connection to the land and to someone who had shown him a new way of seeing the world. He realized that whatever decision he made would shape the rest of his life. The thought did not scare him as much as he thought it would. Instead, it gave him a sense of calm. He knew that he had changed, and that he could not simply return to who he had been before. The journey had taught him too much for that. As the night grew quieter, he felt a growing certainty within himself. He did not know exactly what the future would hold, but he knew that he wanted to keep learning, keep walking this land, and keep building the connection he had found. But choice was not about giving up his past, but about embracing what he had discovered. When morning came, he stood with a clearer mind and a steady heart. He knew he was close to making a decision that would guide the rest of his path. The land around him felt calm, as if it were waiting to see which direction he would choose. The morning came slowly, like it always did in that wide and quiet land. Soft light spread across the hills, and a gentle wind moved through the dry grass. He stood outside his small camp and watched the sun rise. For a long moment, he did not move. He simply breathed and looked at the land that had slowly begun to feel familiar to him. When he first arrived, everything had seemed distant and uncertain. Now, each hill and each path felt like part of a place he understood more deeply. He knew that this day mattered. For many days he had been thinking about the choice before him. He had walked the land, spoken with the Apache woman, and learned more than he had expected. He had also remembered the task that had brought him here. At first, that task had felt clear and urgent. Now it felt far away, like something from another time. He did not ignore it, but he could not pretend it held the same importance in his heart. He packed his things slowly, not because he was unsure, but because he wanted to think carefully about every step. The sky above him was clear, and the air carried the calm feeling of a new beginning. He started walking toward the valley where he often met her. Each step felt steady and certain. He did not rush. He did not feel the need to hurry anymore. As he walked, he thought about the journey that had brought him here. He remembered the first morning when he had left camp with a clear goal. He remembered the long hours of walking, the confusion of fading tracks, and the moment he first saw her by the stream. That meeting had seemed small at the time, but it had changed the direction of everything that followed. Since then, his days had been filled with quiet lessons, shared steps, and conversations that stayed in his mind long after they ended. When he reached the valley, he saw her near the stream again. She was standing in the same calm way as before, gathering water and looking out across the land. When she noticed him, she gave a small nod. There was no surprise in her expression, only a quiet understanding. It felt as though she knew this day would come. They walked together along the stream without speaking at first. The sound of water moving over stones filled the silence between them. After a while, he told her that he had been thinking about his path. He spoke slowly and honestly. He said that when he first came, he believed his journey would be short and simple. He thought he would finish his task and leave, but the land and the time he had spent there had changed him. She listened carefully, her expression calm and thoughtful. She did not interrupt. When he finished, she asked what he felt now. He paused before answering. He said that he no longer felt pulled strongly toward the life he had left behind. He had learned to see the world differently. He had learned to move with patience and to value the quiet connections he had found. Breath. He said that leaving this place felt like turning away from something important. They sat near the water for a while, letting the quiet settle around them. The sun rose higher, warming the land. He realized that his decision was no longer something he feared. It felt natural, like a path he had already begun to walk. He told her that he wanted to stay longer, to keep learning and to understand the land more fully. He did not know exactly what that would mean for the future, but he felt sure that it was the right choice. She looked at him for a long moment, then gave a gentle smile. Psst. She said that the land welcomed those who respected it and were willing to learn. She did not promise that everything would be easy. That staying would bring its own lessons and challenges. But he nodded, understanding that nothing meaningful came without effort. He was ready for that.
Over the next days, he began to settle into a new rhythm.
He no longer woke with the feeling of chasing something. Instead, he woke with a sense of purpose that felt steady and calm. He helped gather food and learned more about the plants and paths of the land. He listened to stories and shared some of his own.
Each day brought small moments of growth. He realized that belonging was not something that happened all at once.
It came slowly, through trust and shared experience. He also took time to reflect on the life he had left behind. He knew that he could not simply forget it. It had shaped who he was and taught him many useful skills. But he also knew that he did not have to return to it in the same way. He could carry those experiences with him while choosing a new direction. The thought gave him peace. One evening, as the sky turned deep shades of blue and the first stars appeared, he stood on a hill overlooking the valley. The air was cool, and the land felt calm. The Apache woman joined him there. They stood side by side, looking out at the wide horizon. There was no need for many words. The silence felt comfortable and strong. He realized that he no longer felt like a visitor. He felt like someone who had found a place to grow and to understand himself better. The journey that had begun as a simple mission had turned into something much more meaningful. He had come to hunt his quarry, but instead he had found a connection that changed his path completely. As the night grew darker and the stars filled the sky, he felt a quiet sense of gratitude. He did not know exactly what the future would bring, but he knew he was ready to face it. Round is to chosen to stay, to learn, and to build something real in the place where his journey had taken an unexpected turn. He stood there for a long time, listening to the soft sounds of the land and feeling a steady calm within himself. The path ahead was open, and for the first time in a long while he did not feel the need to rush. He felt at home in the present moment, ready to walk forward one step at a time.